this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. Delighted to have back with us Neera Tanden, who is CEO and president of the Center for American Progress. Welcome.
Great to be with you as always.
It is great to be with you, but something not great is happening, and that is this tax and spend monstrosity that Republicans have come up with. What is the basic framework that they are trying to accomplish?
Well, fundamentally, this reconciliation bill, which is a technical term for what they call this big, beautiful bill, that is anything but. It is a nice Orwellian way to describe legislation that is the largest scale Robin Hood in reverse legislation in my adult lifetime in maybe modern American history. The basic function of this bill is to pass a gigantic tax bill that is really skewed to the wealthiest Americans. And they have this magic trick, which they both cut services, healthcare for millions of Americans after this legislation. If this legislation passes, after this legislation passes, 14 million people who have health insurance today would lose their health insurance. So that's number one. It basically robs healthcare and food assistance from the poorest Americans, but also millions of working class Americans in order to fund a tax cut. But it doesn't even fully fund that tax cut. So we still see trillions of dollars in deficit spending. So if you can imagine legislation that both increases the deficit, rips healthcare and food assistance out from people in order to fund a massive tax giveaway to the wealthiest Americans, that would be your big, beautiful bill. And now you know why it is such an Orwellian term, because it is a giant sock to working class people in order to fund tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans.
Joni Ernst said the quiet part out loud when she essentially said, well, you're going to die anyway, and then followed up with this very creepy video from a cemetery. Is that a fundamental problem that they cannot get around, that they are taking healthcare away from people and even their own constituents know it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a super illustrative problem point. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was a super illustrative example of what we are dealing with, right? So here are the facts. The facts are that millions of people will lose health care because they take almost $1 trillion out of the Medicaid program. Let me say that again. Almost $1 trillion out of the Medicaid program. What does that mean? That means people will not have health care. What does that mean? That means they will not have access to doctors. They will not have access to the care they need. Now, the Center for American Progress did an analysis, and this translates into 22,000 deaths across the country. And what's really important is that actual Americans understand that health insurance saves lives. People who have health insurance, if they need like heart bypass surgery, they actually go to the doctor and they discover it before they have an emergency. That is the whole point of healthcare and health insurance. And so we also know when people don't have health insurance, they don't get the critical care they need, oftentimes until it's too late. So what is really crystal clear about this whole debate is how much Republicans are essentially scared of having it, because they cannot answer their constituents on this basic point, which is, isn't your job to help protect people, not ensure that there's more widespread death, which she could not actually deal with? And I thought this was, really important for the country to see, which is there is no answer as to why they would take away health care from people who need it. This is wildly unpopular. It's wildly unpopular everywhere. It's wildly unpopular in Iowa. That's why you have everyday Iowans going into a town hall and saying, people are going to die. And you know why she was so flip? Because she doesn't have a genuine answer. There is no genuine answer. I'll say one last point about this. Democrats offered an amendment that said, let's pass the tax cuts, but not for anyone over $5 million. Republicans voted that down. Let's pass the tax cuts for everyone except people making over $50 million. They voted that down. Then Democrats said, okay, let's pass all the tax cuts except for people making over $1 billion. Every Republican voted that down. The reason why they are cutting Medicaid and blowing up the deficit is because they want gigantic tax cuts for billionaires. And, many of these are their donors now. And that's why this is so wrong. And we all need to work to stop it.
Aside from individual people dying, rural hospitals are going to
Mhm.
die. And that might be the explanation for why that left-winger, Josh Hawley, not, is opposed to this. It is one of the most rural killing bills in every sense of the word possible, because aren't rural hospitals dependent upon the Medicaid reimbursements they get?
In fact, the healthcare system is a fragile system. I'll say, I think people forget how interconnected it is. So it is absolutely the case that rural hospitals that have, that are really barely making ends meet as it is. We've seen a whole tidal wave of rural hospitals close in communities across this country. And with this legislation, we at the Center for American Progress found 190 rural hospitals would close. 190 rural hospitals. Now, these rural hospitals, when a rural hospital closes, it means instead of getting emergency care in half an hour, sometimes people have to go 2 hours, 3 hours, get helicopter rides to get the care they need. That also threatens people's health care, but it also threatens livelihoods in rural communities. These are employers in rural communities. And, I think Josh Hawley recognized two things. Not only did he recognize that rural hospitals will close, but he also recognizes that his own constituents rely on Medicaid. Let's just remember Medicaid, the vast majority of people on Medicaid are working class people. In Missouri, they are his constituents. In Mike Johnson's district, they're his constituents. And I think this is a real clash between people who recognize that the government should actually be helping people and not rip away healthcare from people, and others who, because of their ideology or just generally being opposed to healthcare for people, that they are using this as an excuse to get a program that really helps so many millions of Americans.
Also the case that when they're confronted with these facts, they lie. And they lie boldly. We now have fact checkers from the Washington Post, from the New York Times, virtually everyone, independent groups, that when they get up there and they say, we're not cutting Medicaid, wrong, that's a lie. So how are Democrats going to peel off some of these Republicans? Because they don't have the votes, even if every Democrat votes against this. What
Yeah.
is the game plan for peeling these people off? And it is a matter of focusing attention on individual senators who already have expressed concerns.
Yeah, so I think this is a hugely critical time. Really, the next 2, 3 weeks are the time to make voices heard on this. They do not have a package together. There are a lot of senators who are concerned about the Medicaid cuts. Josh Hawley, as we discussed, Senator Tillis from North Carolina, Senator Collins from Maine, Senator Murkowski from Alaska. There are lots of people who are concerned about both the Medicaid cuts, like Shelley Moore Capito, even Senator Justice from West Virginia, as well as taking away the investments in clean energy, which have been helping a lot of communities across the country, including in states like Ohio for Senator Moreno. So, here's what I'd say. What Trump wants, what the Republicans want, is for everyone to assume this is a done deal. And it is not a done deal. And it isn't a done deal. And the reason why we know it's not a done deal is because they need to lie to actually get through an interview. It is the fact that they need to lie, that they know this legislation is hugely unpopular. And if they actually admit it to the facts, which is that they are ripping healthcare away from millions of people to pay for a tax cut for the wealthiest Americans in the country, that the whole country would rebel. So what do they do to get through that interview? They just make facts up. The fact that Mike Johnson goes on an interview, or OMB director Russ Vought goes to an interview and just I I know reporters want to say they're falsehoods, but they are lies. That no one will lose Medicaid. That there's just illegal immigrants. When you hear that, it is false. There are no illegal immigrants. The Medicaid program isn't available to illegal immigrants. These are all ways in which they are lying to the American people to do this egregious thing, which, a lot of people have a hard time believing that they are actually going to cut Medicaid, but they are on the verge of cutting Medicaid because they are trying to do this. They want to basically pass a tax cut for people who don't really need it.
If people want to verify this information for themselves, can they go to CAP's website? Tell folks where they can go.
You
They
can
can look
go
at this for
to
themselves.
You can go to AmericanProgress.org, the Center for AmericanProgress.org. You can find it either way. But as you said, Jennifer, there's a fact check out on the New York Times website. The Washington Post has done fact checks. The Congressional Budget Office has published its letters analyzing the legislation that 8 million people would be dropped immediately from the premium tax credits. That they aren't expanding. It's 14 million people. So, these are facts out in the world. And I think I think the truth is that if you have something terrible to sell and you really can't sell it, that's when you lie. And so, we have the truth on our side. Now, often that's not enough, but what we are seeing is that independent voters, Democrats, and even Republicans, when they learn the facts, oppose this legislation. And what they're hoping to do is to pass this so quickly that people don't have enough time to get engaged. That's why it's so crucial for people to call their member of Congress, call their senators, let them know that you're opposed.
And this is why, by the way, in the House, they took these votes in the deep, dark hours of the night, people. If they thought this was a great winner, they would do it in prime time, but they sure haven't. Neera, thank you so much. I feel like it's deja vu all over again. We had these same conversations during the Affordable Care Act. And you know what? Getting people, including Republicans, to focus on the fact they're going to lose health care won the day then, and God willing, it'll win the day again. So we're going to keep up with you, keep up with the other folks at CAP, and tell this story because, as you say, the facts are on our side. So thanks so much, Neera. Appreciate it.
Thank you.